Hello everyone, welcome. This is a slightly different stream for me, even though I do tend to talk quite a lot on my streams now and drum a little bit less than I used to. This one is kind of an on-purpose talking stream, and I thought what better way to start an on-purpose talking stream than by drumming. So, the drumming Discord. I joined this Discord channel maybe last week, the week before. Actually, no, I think I was already in there. I was going down my list of Discord channels and just looking at what was what and kind of yeeting myself from the ones that I wasn't really participating in. And the drumming one, there's loads of people talking about things that I'm like, well, I know the answer to that. So let me see if I can provide an answer for you. A couple of people asking things about E-drums and setting things up and tuning E-drums and that kind of thing. So I threw in a little bit of my knowledge to try and help these people out. And that started a conversation, and a couple of people were like, hang on a minute, are you actually Jay from TESSERACT? I'm like, yes, I'm actually Jay from TESSERACT. And that very quickly turned into, hey, do you want to do an AMA? I'm like, yep, okay. So that's what we're doing here today. And I just want to say a big thank you to the guys at the Drumming Discord for asking me to do this, for arranging all of the questions. Yeah, thank you very much for doing all that, guys. It's an honor for me to be asked, and I hope that some of the answers that I give are going to help people out. I've tried to make sure everything is set up in advance so that I don't have any tech issues, because that does sometimes happen on my streams. And the way I'm going to read all of this is just on my phone, because it's kind of easy. I thought I'd set up a screen to do it, but it's easier if it's just on my phone here. So, loads of questions. Let's see. There's a load of them in here. I'm going to try and get through all of them. If there's anything that I don't cover, and you guys have got questions, then drop them into the Twitch chat, and I'll do my best to answer them there as well. But these ones have been asked in advance, so I'm going to try and get through these first. The very first one that I think is going to be a good one. How did you get your start in music? Like, how did you start your music career? There's very few. There's multiple parts of this question. So, do you have formal professional education? Did you teach yourself? Were the bands before TESSERACT? How did your current band start? Okay, so there's multiple parts to this one question. This is going to be an hour just talking about this one thing. How did I get my start in music, or my music career? Okay, so I'm going to go right back to answer this question, because it's all part of the same thing. I have always been musically capable, let's say. I've always been kind of interested in music. I've always wanted to play music. I've always wanted to listen to music. And for, I want to say, my third Christmas, my parents bought me a little keyboard, tiny little Casio keyboard. And I instantly just knew where to place my fingers to play, to recount songs that I'd heard. I'd committed these songs to memory, and I just knew where my fingers should go to play them. It just seemed obvious to me. I don't know where that came from. That's a mystery. That's just inherited talent, I suppose, at a genetic level from probably my grandparents. My granddad on my dad's side was very musical, so I've kind of got that from that side of the family. And I carried on playing keyboards. My parents kept buying me bigger and bigger keyboards. I had 3 different ones. Up until I was about age 12, 13, I was in middle school, and that probably year 7 for me, so grade 7 in the US. And I was in a band with my 2 friends. I was playing keyboards. We had bass, guitar, keyboards, and you couldn't hear the keyboards. we were so young. We didn't have the technology to make it louder. We didn't have amps and all that kind of stuff. We just had the speaker that was built into the keyboard, and then an electric guitar and a bass guitar. So they were way louder than me. And there was a drum kit in the room, and my mate Steve was like, "Oh, why don't you just play the drums instead? We need a drummer more than we need a keyboard guy." So I was like, okay. and we were just playing like Nirvana, basically. We were playing Nirvana songs. So I picked up the sticks. It was an old like 70s Premier gold sparkle drum kit, and I sat down at the kit, no idea what I was going to do, and they started playing Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was like, oh my god, I can just kind of do it. And I could just kind of, I played the fill, like, and went into playing the song. I knew where my hands should be, I knew where my feet should be. I just kind of got some coordination to do that. So that was it. That was where it all began. And then between there and Tesseract, there was a lot of trial and error. There was a load of bands that I was in that we practiced for ages and then never played gigs, or we'd like build a rehearsal room and then the band would break up, and all of these things would happen. There's so much that happened that I probably don't need to get into. But the career side of all of this really kicked off when I was 26, I think. I was working for a company in Reading in the UK, and I didn't ever really know what this company did. I was hired as like a graphics specialist, graphics and like formatting of Word documents and things, and everyone randomly was made redundant from that job. Right, the business had got no new business, so everyone was made redundant, and I was part of the sales team, so I guess it was kind of my fault. And it happened to be about 2 months before I was going to quit my job anyway, to go on tour with Tesseract, because we had our first North American tour lined up. And that point there is really where my career started, because that's where I left my full-time job and started actually just drumming and being in a band full-time. But that's not the only thing that I was doing. So up until a few years ago, like through all 4 albums, to be honest, I've been doing other work to make sure that I can still be a full-time musician. And I think people have asked questions about that in here, so I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But really, Tesseract was a band that we already had a following online. We'd built this grassroots thing, and quite a few people were interested in us. Labels were coming to us, asking to work with us, and we were like, well, we're going to hold out for the best thing we possibly can. And we got a reasonable deal with Century Media. We had an amazing rep there. It was the artist relations guy called Steve Joe. He's an amazing dude, and he really helped us out. He kind of got our foot in the door, got us the tour with Devin Townsend in North America, which is our first North American tour. And from there, it's just grown. So I guess everything up to that point was just preparing me for being in a band full time. But yeah, that was like the start of my musical career, if you like, and the rest of it since then has just been a flipping roller coaster. Do I have formal professional education, or did I teach myself? So I don't have professional formal education. No, I haven't been to a music school. I applied to go to Drum Tech in Acton in London. So that's like in my history, I don't know even if it's still there. I think it probably is, but that was a really good music school to go to, especially for drummers, because it was drum specific. It wasn't just like going to a random music school that does everything. It was focused on drums. So that was where I wanted to go. And really, I wanted to go there because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was trying to delay getting a job. I was trying to delay just going, oh, okay, well, I'll just get a job then. Because in my mind, I was going to be a drummer. That's all I was going to do. And I really didn't want to just sack it all off and be like, okay, well, I'm getting a job now. Because what happens then is you very easily end up not being a musician. You end up working, getting financial commitments. That part of your life starts to develop. So the creative musical side of your life, the thing that you really want to do, it's harder for that to happen because this other thing is kind of taking over and life happens. So I was really, really reluctant to do anything that was going to be a job or a career. And drum tech was the answer to that for me. So I'd done my high school education. I'd done A-levels in the UK, which actually ended up just being A-level. I only really focused on music technology because that was the only thing that interested me, and I'd like sacked everything else off. And then I thought, cool, drum tech. So I had a couple of lessons in school as well, like drum lessons in school, but it was always... it wasn't that great, the drum lessons in my school. It was kind of... once a week, 30 minutes, you get to go and sit with a guy who they hire in. He teaches this specific instrument. And it was always to pass a grade. You know, you got your grades 1 to 8. And it was like, learn this rudiment to pass this test. And that was not a good way to learn drums, because it turns it into homework. It turns it into like a chore, into something you don't really want to do. And... I hated that. I was not into that side of it at all. It's like, play a paradiddle in front of these 3 people. They tick this box on this sheet. Okay, he played a paradiddle. Okay, play this stroke roll in front of these people. Okay, he played that. Okay, here's a piece of music that you've been playing for the past 6 months with your drum teacher. We'll put the sheet music in front of you. Play that. Okay, he played it. Cool, you've got grade 4. It was... there's nothing musical about that. It was rubbish. So... I didn't really take anything out of it. And before going to drum tech, there were some aspects that I had to understand in order to pass the test to get into the school. And one of them was practical. I just had to turn up and play some drums for a guy in a room. The other one was like a written test. And I'd been told, I think it said on their website, some of the things you have to kind of have an understanding of before you can do this. And it was an understanding of different types of rhythms, different world rhythms. And I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know anything about jazz. I didn't know anything about Latin rhythms, about blues, about, whatever. Insert anything that isn't technical. I didn't know anything about it. So... I had some lessons with a guy called Andy Edwards in the Midlands in the UK, and at the time he was drumming for Robert Plant, and I'm like, shit, this guy, he's going to be good, isn't he? And he was very, very good. He'd got this whole drum school set up in like this industrial unit. It was like above a car workshop or something in random industrial estate in the Midlands, and he'd got 3 or 4 rooms with drum kits in, and... I explained what it was that I wanted to do. I wanted to understand some of these things to get into this school, and he was like, right... Because he actually did some work at that school. Like, that's another reason I went to him. Like, he was like one of the lecturers at that school every now and then. And he said to me after a very short amount of time, he was like, you're not going to want to go to drum tech. I'm going to show you these things, and then you're not going to want to go. And he was right. He was spot on. Like, I learned some of the things that he showed me, and I'm like, oh man, like, do I want to do this rubbish for like the next 3 years and be in loads of debt? And to me, though, that was still preferable to getting a job and it not being actually what I want to do. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for this. Went down to London, went to the entrance exam for drum tech, played some music for the guy. He was like, oh, that's pretty cool. One of the beats I actually played was from a song that I was writing at the time that was... this weird 5 pattern, and when I did that, he was like, "Oh, okay, like, did you just play that? Like, you thought of that right now?" I'm like, "No, I've been practicing it. Like, that's something that I'm writing for a band I'm in." Oh, okay. And got to the written exam, I couldn't even answer the first question. It was all sheet music, and it was theory, and I didn't get in. I didn't get into the school. So at that point, I'm like, well, brilliant. What do I do? I got a job as a civil servant working for the government office in the Midlands in the UK. Fantastic job that was. And I spent all of the money I got from that on music, on buying and upgrading my gear, and affording my own rehearsal space, somewhere that I didn't have to go and set my stuff up every time. I could just kind of keep my stuff set up all the time. And that's where all my money went, really. So I was still really, really focused on music. But formal education, no. I am basically self-taught. I don't read music. I can write it in Guitar Pro, but I can't read it. It's of no use to me. If you put sheet music in front of me and say, "Oh, here you go, follow this, it'll help you," it won't help me. It's following MIDI is easier for me, a lot easier than following sheet music. Were there any bands I was in before Tesseract? Yes, but they were just there were relationships until that were preparing me for the actual relationship, if that makes sense. They weren't even at the time. Actually, and this is important to say. At the time, I believed that they were the band because it was the best thing that I've played so far. It was the most challenging thing that I'd played so far. The people were writing stuff that was complex, and each new thing was like, oh man, yeah, that's going to be fun to play. Like, it was always a challenge. So I always thought it's going somewhere. This is because it doesn't sound like everything else out there. What does it say that I'm on Sekiro? Could one of my mods change that for me, please? Sorry. I probably haven't changed the stream to music. Sorry, guys. That's my fault. I thought I'd fixed everything before the stream, but clearly not. So yeah, there were bands before Tesseract. There was my first band was called This Way Out, which is the band I was in where I learned to play the drums. I was in a band called Waiting for Sunday. I was in a band called Judan, Judan. I was in a band called Tom versus 1983, which made no sense. I was in a band called Blue Light District, like a blues covers band. I played a lot of gigs with that band, but we were not good. I had a lot of fun with them, but it wasn't my thing at all, really. And then I was in a band called Araya, and that was the one that led into Tesseract. I was playing a show with Araya, supporting Fell Silent, which was the two of the guys. One of the guys went off to be the main founder of Monuments, the band, John Brown. The other guitarist in that band was Ackle from Tesseract. I ended up playing a show supporting Fell Silent, who was supporting Enter Shikari in this tiny, weird venue in Luton in the UK. And at the end of that show, Ackle was like stood behind me and he's like, maybe we should have a jam for Tesseract. I was like, yes, maybe we should have a jam for Tesseract. Thank you very much. I've only been bugging you for a year to make this happen. So that was it. And then how did Tesseract start? This is still the first question. I knew this would happen. My dad does this as well. I'm a sister. You ask them to tell a story and they just go off into full Jackanory mode and they literally tell you a massive story. How did the current band start? Well, that was it. That was how the current band started. Ackle was posting demos and ideas that he was writing on MySpace and on the Meshuggah forums and things like that. So people were hearing it and going, wow, this is good, including myself. The guitarist for Araya, the band I was in at the time, sent me a link to some of his music and was like, what do you think of this? I'm like, mate, this is flipping amazing. What do you mean? What do I think of this? And I didn't realize that it was all one guy. Like, I didn't realize that drums could be programmed like that. I didn't realize that it was all like fake drums, and it blew my mind. And as soon as I heard it, I'm like, I've got to play drums to this. This is literally better than the band that I'm in. And I hassled Ackle. I was messaging him for like at least a year, probably more like 18 months, saying, mate, have you got a drummer? And he's like, yeah, I kind of got a guy in America who will drum for me. I'm like, okay, but that doesn't sound like you've got a drummer. That sounds like you've got a guy in America who you will never meet who's going to play drums over Tesseract. And I was like, let's sort it out in the UK, which we did. We got together after that gig that I played. He sent me a CD of absolutely everything that he did because it was before you could send that much stuff on the internet easily. And I learned all of it. Just listening to it on repeat for like a year, I learned all of it. We got together for a jam. And then a couple of weeks later, the bassist came down, Amos. He came down. And then a couple of weeks later, he brought James down. Amos and James used to be in the same band before. And then a couple of weeks later, they brought Abby, one of the first vocalists, down. So 3 members of Amos's old band, including Amos, they kind of joined Tesseract. We started out with Abby, did a bunch of shows, even international shows, but realised it wasn't quite the right fit. His voice wasn't really what we wanted to make this the full thing. And we found Dan. He was in a band called First Signs of Frost, and I think Ackle was mixing their album at the time, and heard Dan and was like, oh my God, he's a good singer. Yoink. And we did. We pinched him. We wanted him to sing for us, and he sent us like a 20-second clip of Concealing Fate Part 6 was the first thing he sent us. And it was just like, oh my God, mate, just stop every other project you're in and be in Tesseract, for God's sake. Like, this is how this should sound. So, yeah, that was how it all got started. That was the first question, guys. I just answered the first question. I'm sorry, this is going to take the rest of the day to get through. Let's see. Oh, there was a lot of good questions here. I'm trying to do the ones that have got upvoted the most. This is an interesting one. So this hasn't got upvoted loads, but I do want to talk about it because it's very important. I'm actually writing about this at the moment. One of the things that's on my bucket list is to like write a book. And of all the things, I'm not interested in really writing fiction because I'm not. I'm interested in writing things that can help people. And I post these little morning coffee things every now and then, which is me sitting down literally with a coffee in the morning because I always have a good stream of consciousness writing first thing in the morning. And sometimes it's just rubbish and nonsense and it just helps clear my brain. Other times I get into a mode where I'll recall a story. I'll recall something that I think might be helpful to other people. And I'll write all of that out, post it online. And I get so much engagement from that. It's crazy. So many people respond to me and send me messages. And so I feel as though there's value there. And this question definitely is going to help me talk about things in that same light. So anyway, how do you make drumming a full-time career? I know it takes getting yourself out there, but what more? Do you have to sacrifice what do you have to sacrifice or dedicate to make it work? So, okay, how do you make drumming a full-time career? I'm going to answer this, not just drumming. This is how you become like a full-time musician, which is literally what I'm writing about. The working title of my book is The Full-Time Musician. So, how do you do it? First off, there's so many angles to this that I could come at it from. There's not one way of doing it. You have to diversify. So the only people that are full-time musicians in the truest sense of the word, so all they're doing is writing music and going on tour. And coming home and writing music and going on tour. The only people that are doing that, you've heard their names, and most people in the world have heard their names, okay? The Ed Sheerans of the world. They're the only people that are doing that. And they're also doing the other things that we do. They're doing merchandise and they're doing one-off paid things that you go and do. We don't do much of that because we're not famous enough, but they're the only people that get enough money just from music to actually do that. And for a band like us, we have to really think about and plan very, very carefully to make sure that we're saying yes to the right opportunities, and not just crippling ourselves financially. And the music industry has also changed, right? The music industry has changed. So up until about the 90s, it was much easier and much more straightforward for bands to get paid. Physical record sales, the people bought your CDs because that was how you get it, your CDs or your tapes or your vinyl, whatever. That's died now, other than for your most hardcore of fans. So you've got a hardcore fan base, most bands have, and there's enough of them for you to put out however many CDs, depending on how big you are. A couple of thousand CDs maybe. And that you make more money from that than you do from streaming, which is wild because Tesseract, right? We've got 180,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, and our total income from streaming, right, in a year, total income from streaming in a year is about 30 grand. So you're like, okay, 30 grand, split that between everyone in the band, assuming there's no commissions and all that kind of stuff. That's not paying people's rent and overheads for their life all of the year. You've got to do all these other things. Whereas if you're a bigger band, that would probably do it, right? If we were getting 500,000 from streaming alone, because that's the only real way that people are digesting music now. That's the only way people do it. Then everyone in the band can suddenly get paid from music alone, and you can go on tour, and that becomes a separate thing. But touring, the cost of that is immense. It's so massive. There's if I go back to us playing our first shows as Tesseract, where we're driving around in our cars, loaded up with drum kits and amps and everything, and we've got like 3 cars on the road, traveling around the UK, traveling around Europe. That's how we did it when we started out. The money that the band members got at that point versus now is about the same. And that's been 15 years, because the cost of doing it goes up at the same rate that the income goes up. So you've got, when you're small, you're doing it all yourself, right? So the overheads are pretty low, but your fees are pretty low. So it all kind of evens out. You start to get a bit bigger. Oh, okay, well, we can afford a sound engineer now. We don't have to use the venue sound engineer, so you're paying for that guy. You've got, when you get to the next level, you've got, and you've got a merch guy now. You don't have to sit and do your own merch. You're going to bring a merch person out with you, so you pay them. And then you get a bit bigger. Oh, we probably need a tour manager. We can't really do this ourselves anymore because we're making too many fuck-ups. Let's get a tour manager involved. So they take a fee. And all of these people, as well as bringing them out on tour with you, they've got per diems. So you pay them a little bit of money each day on top of their salary to get food and stuff. That's kind of a normal thing in the industry. You've also got the cost of their travel, their flights. If you're flying around festivals and things, it's another flight to add on to the cost of it all. You've got all these commissions as well that managements and agents take. So it all just grows, and the production basically is the cost that keeps going up, because as you keep growing, your production cost gets bigger. You've got big screens, big lights, crew to put all of that kind of stuff up. So, and I know that this continues up because I've spoken to people that are much bigger than us, and they've told me the same thing. People in the biggest bands that you guys can think of have told me the same thing, that it doesn't ever change. Like, you just have to accept that this is how it is. So to make money as a full-time musician, you have to diversify, as well as the band making a little bit of money for you from merchandise, royalties, maybe something left at the end of a tour. Generally, it goes down to zero, though. You have to find ways of making money. So one thing that I do is this. I stream on Twitch every now and then, and there's a little bit of money that comes in from doing that because people subscribe to me doing this on here. The main thing that I do now that makes 90% of my money is drum lessons. So I have a drum lesson website where I've got a big course that I've put together, which I've compiled from lessons that my one-on-one students have asked me. I've kind of got it all into one place, and I try and sell that to people. I'll do some one-on-one lessons, but that's kind of reserved for a higher tier. I've got some one-off courses that are available. I've got a monthly subscription thing that's like $20 that's available. And I've put it all together in one place. That's how I make the majority of my money. And that's a lot of work. And I also have to keep saying that to the world. That's the other thing. You, as a self-employed person, you feel as though, you put out an Instagram story. You've told the world that this thing is done. I've been working on this thing for 3 months. Here's this new drum lesson that I've made. I've just spent the last week doing it. Put it out on Instagram once. Done. No, not done at all. You have to grow a mailing list. You have to put it out on all the social medias, and you have to say it multiple times, because you're constantly battling with everyone else out there that has got the attention of these other people. Your mailing list as a self-employed person is the most useful and most important way to get the message out, because the goalposts can't shift with a mailing list. Unlike social media, where all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we want you to do reels now. We don't want you to do photos anymore. You've got to make a video, and you've got to put that out, and you've got to use captions and whatever. With an email, people get it and either delete it or they read it, but they will see that they've got an email. So no one in the background can change whether someone receives an email or not. So your mailing list is the biggest, most useful tool. Everything else, and getting people into it is, I suppose, the difficult thing at that point. But you end up basically getting quite good at marketing. Like as a self-employed musician, you have to understand a little bit about marketing, because if you don't, you're not going to make any money. That's basically it. But there's things you can do, like session work as well pays. I do a little bit of that, and that pays well. You basically need to find out how to have a side hustle, and importantly, you have to find out something that you can do that makes money when you're away on tour. So I've done this as well. I thought I mentioned a minute ago, I used to make graphics and do document formatting for a company. I turned that into something that I could do as a consultant. And doing it as a consultant meant that I could do it from anywhere in the world because it was on my terms. And I also got paid like 4 times as much to do it as a consultant, because I wasn't like someone's employee. So you say, I want this much money, and they go, okay. So I did that through a bunch of tours, and it's a lot of hard work, but it meant I actually made a load of money when I was on those tours, rather than sitting in my bunk and twiddling my thumbs and playing Angry Birds or something. So you've got to find something that doesn't require you to be in one place to make money. You've got to develop that thing to make sure that you've got a good chance of being a full-time musician. And around the time that Tesseract became a band and really launched, I'd developed that thing. I'd built 4 rehearsal studios in Reading in the UK. I'd flipping built that up. And I built that up over years, though. It was probably 6 years in at that point by the time I had 4 of them. And I built them all one at a time. I did most of the work myself. It was absolutely knackering. I'd go to work, wake up at 7 a.m., finish work at 5, drive through the rush hour to the studios for about an hour, and then I'd be doing, brickwork, stud work, putting up soundproof walls, putting down floors, putting lighting in and cabling and all of that. Learn how to do all that myself, and built these rooms, rented them out, and then as one got full, I used the profits to build another one until I had 4 of them. And by the time Tesseract got to a point where we were ready to quit jobs and go away on tour and give it a real good go, I'd got a means of basically passive income from these studios. Whether I turned up to them or not, people were using them and paying rent on them. So that money was going into the bank regardless of where I was in the world. I just had to make sure that someone was going down and checking the gear and vacuuming and emptying the bins and that kind of thing. So that was my main business, and that's still open. I don't have it anymore. I sold it to a guy in the UK when I moved over to the US, because I didn't want to try and run a local studio from an ocean away. But that was my business for 15 years, and having that enabled me to be in Tesseract and not worry about money, because it made enough money for me to be in Tesseract. Now, the main way that I make money, I get a little bit of money from Tesseract each month, not as much as you might think, definitely not enough to pay my bills and the mortgage, and drum lessons is my main way of doing it. Supplement it with a bit of money from Twitch, and occasionally do session work. But merchandise, I suppose, is the main way I would say a band makes money. Merchandise and music royalties are the main ways that bands make money. You don't really make it from ticket sales anymore, unless you're very lucky or much, much, much bigger than Tesseract, because it all gets channeled into the cost of doing the show. Big answer, but hopefully that's given you a bit of insight into how to be a full-time musician. What you have to sacrifice or dedicate to make it work is the other part of that. I think I've kind of answered that in there. It's your responsibility to find a way to make money, and you have to sacrifice whatever you have to sacrifice to make that work. It's because it's not about luck. It's about how much harder you're willing to work than the other person. How much pain can you take to keep this thing going, versus people who quit and end up just getting a job. And it's the same for everyone. Like I just, if you're thinking of it in terms of luck, I don't really believe that luck is involved in this, because you make your own luck by working hard. But the only way that luck really worked for me is that I stumbled upon this rehearsal studio business, because I'd built this room anyway, and it kind of just naturally developed into a business. I didn't build it to be one. I just had this room, and people started to hear about it and rent it off me, and I was like, oh, this makes a bit of money. Maybe I'll make another one. So let's see another question. From Deliverance. I think Deliverance is in chat. Do you have any go-to fills? Okay, so this is about drumming. This is the first question I'm going to actually talk about drumming now. Amazing. Do you have any go-to fills or rhythms that come up intentionally or unintentionally in your playing with Tesseract or otherwise? If so, why do you think I use them often? Do they feel like part of what makes up your unique drum voice? Can I demonstrate them? This one's been upvoted as well. So, do I have any go-to fills or rhythms? Yes, I do have go-to things. Let me just have a little bit of my tea before I try and do them. So, as I mentioned, I'm self-taught. That means I haven't gone through books and books and books learning all the rudiments. Haven't done that. I don't really read music. In fact, I can't read music. I can like very slowly follow it in Guitar Pro if it's playing along, but I can't just read it. What I can do, though, is kind of figure things out in my brain. I can figure things out in Cubase, and I can follow them that way. That's kind of how I learn. And a lot of it I can just do by ear, maybe because I'm a freak. There's a genuine part of me that thinks maybe I'm just a freak. I've got a genetic ability, something handed down to me at a DNA level that enables me to have better pattern recognition, which very well could be a thing. So, fills and things that I use. My most overused combinations of fills and patterns are... I only learned what it was called the other day. The parapadiddle, right? I thought it was a 5-stroke roll. Literally, I thought it was a 5-stroke roll. I'll play combinations of like right, left, left, right, left. That was all the same thing, I just voiced it on different drums, right? Right, left, left, right, left. If you want to slow it down, you put it there. And you guys, you drummers here, might be hearing that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're hearing it as a quintuplet. So a grouping of 5 where the first beat is on the 1. Okay, that's how people might typically use that. I like to use it though in a different way. I like to use that as a grouping to a quarter note that is based back in 4. So those 5s end up being 16th notes to a quarter note. So instead of that, it's that kind of thing. And immediately when you do that, you've got a more interesting way of voicing that 5. You're splitting the 5 over a 4 count, and it makes this kind of displaced pattern. And it's not too difficult to do either, that. You can just put a metronome on, practice it on a couple of voices. And just practice it like that across a couple of different voices, which is nice and easy. And another way you can do it, turning it into a groove. And there's a Tesseract groove that literally uses that exact pattern. There's a song called Hollow, which is like an older song. We re-recorded it last year for a little EP that we put out. And if you take that exact pattern and put it there, so right, left, left, on the ride and the ghost notes over here. If I do that and then I keep a quarter note there, I can then do what I call a cheat beat, which is where my right foot and right hand are going to sync up. Okay, and then from there, if I go back to the quarter note count that I'm doing over there on the foot, and I imagine that's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I lock into that and place a snare accent on the 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. you've got this kind of sick groove immediately, just from taking that one pattern, realising it's a 5, but I'm going to put it back in quarter note world, and in quarter note world, I'm going to let that thing just keep displacing and displacing and displacing, but I'm going to put a snare accent on that 3, which is going to turn it into a beat. So you can use that kind of thing as a fill or as a beat. And to unlock those kind of things, that's the kind of thing that I cover in my drum lessons. In fact, I literally cover that groove and that pattern because you can do so much with it. You can also, like, you can turn it into a 5-based thing where it feels like a 5. But I really like trying to get things to work as 3s and 4s because that's where the majority of listeners can kind of nod their head and lock into what it is that you're playing. If I'm playing 5s, you'll have some people that will lock in, but most people hear a 4 over things. It's just 16th notes in groups of 5. Yeah, it's not... okay, Peregrine Sid, is it a 5-4 poly or just quintuplets in 4-4? It's not quintuplets in 4-4. It's a 5-4 poly in terms of, like, the... That's your 5-4 poly. The accent, like... If I take everything away and just play what the right hand's playing with the foot, you end up with your 5-4 poly, which is that. You got your 5 and your 4 playing at the same time. So that's where the 5-4 poly is in that. I'm just filling in the rest of the space with 16th notes. So I know it at a 16th note level, which is something else that I think is very important. That's one of, like, the fill type patterns. And I'll do that with, like, a 4, with a 5, a 7, and 9. If you want to add on to it, you just add another couple of notes. And you start practicing those things to a quarter note count. You very quickly end up with a load of, like, crazy ideas. There's a fun one that I'm messing around with that's a 9. That's like, I've been teaching this to my students as well. So same kind of concept. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So putting that to a quarter note. Like, it's kind of difficult to hear that one if you're not used to it. But that can be turned into, like, really sick fills. Same kind of thing as the 5. You just realise in a 9 count to a quarter note. But if you put that back into a triplet feel, you can kind of do these sick fills. Really insane things that you can do with that just by realising it in triplet world, or 30-second notes, which is going to be insanely fast. I don't know if I'm even going to try that, but the same concept, just take an odd number, placing it alongside an even number, generally a 4, and you have loads and loads of things you can do with it. More simple things, though, that I like to mess with are your kind of linear fills, where you've got... Let me change the window so you can see. So if you've got a double pedal, you've probably done that kind of thing, where you're playing a couple of hits, couple of kicks, couple of hits, couple of kicks, maybe 4 hits, couple of kicks. That kind of thing, right? Most people with a double pedal have done that. Well, I'll do it with a double pedal, but I'll also do it with singles. So with a single pedal, doing a heel toe in between. And a pattern I like to use quite a bit is just right, left, and left, right with a pedal between. So using that one, and it means you can, like, you can keep the pedal hat going then if you want to do that. So that's for something I like to use, and also single. So it's important that I'll be able to, that I can do right, left, and left, right. That one's good to get fast. There's just these combinations of patterns, and then you can get to a point where you practice them enough. Again, this is something that I teach, where you get to a point of 16th note flow. So I'll put a metronome on and just practice playing that kind of thing to a metronome, where I'm switching between these handfuls of fill patterns that I've got good at. So I don't know all of them. I haven't got good at every single rudiment. I don't know them all. I haven't practiced loads of things. I haven't sat with books and learnt it all. I've just stumbled upon patterns that work for me, and very often this handful of patterns that I keep reusing, I can voice differently and I can make it work around the kit in different ways. So if I've got a metronome counting or playing along to a song, I'll just mess around trying to keep a consistent 16th note flow using those types of patterns. So let's give you an example, just random. So that was probably 3 different ideas. It was 5-stroke rolls. It was those kick left, kick right, singles as well, and alternating doubles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So doing that between my foot and my hand. You practice that kind of thing to a metronome. You practice changing between the 2 or 3 ideas, and you end up with unlimited numbers of patterns that you can play just by stitching those things together. So that's a handful of things that I use in a fill environment, and I really just honestly, even in TESSERACT now, I just kind of randomly play things like that because it's going to be a bit different each time, and it's going to be a bit more interesting than just playing the exact fill that's on the record. Let's see. What else have we got? I'm just reading some of these questions. Have you approached drumming from a rudimental perspective? Nope, not at all. Do I have any favourite rudiments to orchestrate? So I just kind of did that. Tell us all the creative ways that you've used gaffer tape over the years. Why should drummers have some on hand? So, I mean, that's a random question, but I got a thumbs up, so someone else has upvoted it. I mean, gaffer tape, yes, I take it on tour with me because what happens is the kick drum very often slides forwards when I'm playing it if it's not taped down. Especially if I'm flown to India or you're flown to Australia and I'm not using my kit, I'm getting a rental kit, or any festival in Europe where I'm not using my kit, then I kind of I get a big piece of tape like this. I pull it from in front of the kick, I push it around one of the feet, and then I tape across it behind as well. So I kind of created the letter A in gaff tape, and the point of the A is where the foot of the pedal is, the foot of the kick drum is. I do that on both sides, and then it can't really go that way because it's got a load of pressure from the tape, making sure it can't really go that way. That always works really well. It looks pretty messy, but no one really sees it other than me. I don't use tape on cymbals and drums, though. Some people do that. I don't do that. I don't like all the gunge that it leaves on cymbals, and I don't like how it looks on drums. I end up I use moon gel instead, the little blue gel stuff. I put that on the drums, and that works nicely instead. But again, with moon gel, I cut it in half. So I'll get a pair of scissors, snip it in half, put a little piece at like 12 o'clock, and then another piece usually by the microphone at about 10. If the ring is still too much. So that's what I like to do. Guys, we're coming up to 1 hour in. I've drank a lot of tea and water, and that means that I need to do a wee. So let me go and do that real quick. You get to look at this lovely graphic and listen to a bit of music in the 30 to 40 seconds that it's going to take for me to do this. He's back. Look at that. Magic. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. Right. Let's crack on with these questions. Have I spent time learning any jazz Latin grooves from around the world, or use any of those in your playing in Tesseract? Nope. That's an easy question to answer. I've not spent any time focused on anything other than what I've been interested in Tesseract World. That's literally it. I haven't learned anything about any other type of music. I'm fairly ignorant to everything else apart from the specific type of drumming that I play. I don't know most drummers. I really don't. I don't know most drumming books that people have grown up with. Like, my students sometimes be like, I'm using such and such's book, and I'm like, nope, I don't. So I haven't done anything like that really. Can I go into any of the behind the scenes recording details that initially surprised me? A lot of drummers haven't spent time in a studio, so we don't really understand how artificial it is. And it ends up being played. Yes, okay. This is a very good question. Behind the scenes recording stuff. Okay, so I've recently learned a lot more about the behind the scenes recording stuff because we've just finished recording Tesseract Album 5. And this is the first album since the fifth album. This is the first album since the first album, if that makes sense, where we've gone into a studio and recorded real drums. So Tesseract 1, the black album, the one with the black Tesseract on it, that one, we went into the studio and recorded drums for all of the songs apart from 2 songs on there that we programmed them for because they were like brand new songs and we didn't have time to go back into the studio. And to do that record, we ended up just kind of getting free studio time. Our bassist Amos was working at one of the studios, Metropolis Studios in London, as he was kind of working on the desk at the front entrance and in some of the studios, kind of helping out sessions. And literally, very rich people, would buy time at the studio and then just not turn up. So there was an empty room, and after a few hours, the people that own the studio would be like, okay, well, it's going to be empty. Do you guys want to use it? And Amos would ring us up and be like, guys, get your stuff in your car. Come down here right now. We're going to be using the studio. So we got to use these crazy, amazing studios where, like, Madonna has recorded. Like, literally, it's a crazy, crazy studio. We got to use it for free, which was amazing. And for those recordings, it was literally just me playing along to the songs, the backing tracks, in the live room. We didn't have time to explore sounds. We just set up a kit, threw a bunch of mics on, quickly made sure they sounded okay, played the songs, or played sections of the songs at a time. And then we like stitched those sections together so it sounds like one big performance. But the albums since then, album 2, Altered State, which album 3, Polaris, and album 4, Sonder, those 4 albums were clicked in with a mouse. The drums for those were literally clicked in with a mouse because we're not a very rich band. We don't have enough money. We didn't have enough money and time to go into a studio. So time and money were always the 2 things preventing us from going and doing these things properly, right? And that sucked for me because, I mean, the audio, the experience that the listener gets, I don't think is changed by the fact that it's real drums or fake drums. If you enjoy the music, you enjoy it. I don't think knowing that it's being clicked in with a mouse makes the music worse. I think it's just an ego thing for me that I'm like, oh man, this sucks. Anyway, we and a lot of bands do that as well, by the way. That's not just an us thing. That's most modern metal bands, if they aren't super rich, are not going into a studio to record it because you can make it sound believable and professional by clicking it in. So album 5, we went to Middle Farm Studios in the UK, which is it's in Devon. It's hidden away. No one really knows where it is because it's not on Google Maps. And we spent 5 weeks doing the drums. We spent 1 week exploring sounds, which I've never done before. We put the drums in the room where we wanted them. We explored different drum heads, different microphones, different mic positions, different drums, different cymbal combinations, different settings on all the gear that was in the control room. All these different things we explored for a week, which we've never spent more than a week in a studio ever. So to just be able to do that with drum sounds was immense. And it meant that we got the exact sounds that we wanted. Ended up using a DW Design Series acrylic kit. So like the affordable DW acrylic shells, which I had anyway, and a Yamaha recording custom kick. It sounded amazing. That combination was just like, ooh, that flipping punches. And there were a few different ways in which we actually recorded. So the question here was like, can I go into any of the behind-the-scenes recording details? So yes, there were 3 or 4 different ways that we actually attacked the tracking side of things. The first way, which is how most people probably think it's done. Most people who are like ignorant to the whole process probably think this is how it's done, which is the guy in the studio presses record and the drummer plays the song and it's done. 4 minutes later, your song is done. Hit export, burn a CD, put it on Napster. No, like it's not done like that. It can be done like that, but I think it can be done like that when you like when you're doing that. When you're doing complex mental things, doing a song all the way through becomes probably not optimal because you're going to get a different feel, a different vibe from different sections of the song if you split it up. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But some songs we did play all the way through. There were a handful of songs, I think 2 or 3 songs of the 9 that we recorded I just played all the way through, and I didn't think that would even be something that we'd do. Played it all the way through, like 4 or 5 times, and then we'd go into the control room next door, and then listen, like highlight the chunk that we want to listen to. So we'll highlight, okay, the intro, which is the best intro of these 5. You'd listen to them. That one's the best. Oh, that bit there is the best. That, like, I like that most of that intro, but like the ghost notes there actually just lock in a bit more. They sound better. So you do a thing called comping, which is where you have all these tracks highlighted, all these takes highlighted, and you can kind of be like, that bit, that bit, that bit, that bit, that bit, and it seamlessly flows. As long as I've hit the same cymbals, it all kind of overlaps and seamlessly flows into one lush performance. So we did that like a handful of time. We did that for like 3 tracks. Then the other tracks, we did sections. So you record, a few not a few bars, maybe like a verse. You record a verse, and then you'll record a chorus, or you'll record up to a fill, and then you'll play out of the bit you've just played into the fill, and out of the fill into the next bit, so they can be stitched together. We did that for most of the rest of the songs. And then that's typically how it's done. That's typically how bands actually record these things. Then the third way of doing it, which I was against doing this, and again, it was from an egotistical point of view, because I didn't think this was right. I thought this was cheating. Actually, no, I'll tell you about that in a minute. There's a third way that I haven't spoken about, which is where you slow the thing down 5 to 10% that you're trying to play, and then speed it back up again in software, which works very, very well. There's a sound that you get when you do that. It doesn't increase the pitch, but it kind of locks everything together, because this difficult thing you're trying to do, there's a bit more space for you to do it, so you can focus a bit more. Then you speed it up to the intended speed. We did that with a couple of riffs that were really tricky. And the fourth way of doing it was separates, which means and literally separates. Record your hands separate and then your feet separate. And there's one riff that we're playing in one of the songs. We've got this massive song. It's like 11 minutes. This is really, really, really metal part where the riff, I'll play it. It's metal, right? Super, super, super metal. The most metal moment on the record, probably. And for that part, the producer was like, okay, because I'd learned it, I could play it. He's like, okay, I know you can play it, but I've literally recorded loads of metal bands. Like, he's recorded Architects, he's recorded Periphery, he's recorded, insert any metal band that's big and modern, and he's probably recorded them. And he said, The thing that works best for these sections is if you record separates, because you hit harder down there and you hit harder there. You just focused on two very simple things. So to test this theory, because I was still like, no, it's cheating. Shit off, I don't want to do that. We recorded it my way. We recorded it my way 5% slower, and then we recorded it separates. And then he said, right, come into the studio, we're going to do A, B, C, and you're not going to look at which one's which. I'm just going to play them. You're going to close your eyes, and you're going to choose the one that sounds best. Okay. Listen to them all. That one sounds best. That one's a separates. So I'm like, okay, ultimately, what's the desired outcome from this recording process? The desired outcome is that I enjoy listening to it. The listener has the best possible audio experience. If the best possible audio experience comes from me utilizing this technique, of this genuine recording production technique, then I'll have to go with that. I have to remove ego from the equation and do it however it sounds best. And I know drummers that have tracked entire records like that, and you would have no idea. You'd have no idea because it sounds as though it's a full performance. So those are the few different things that we did to make the Tesseract drums for this record. And it sounds insane. It's the best sounding thing I've heard in a very long time. I'm going to be biased because I have to think that, but I do genuinely think that. I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised when they hear it. We also had to make sure that it wasn't so far away from the traditional Tesseract drum sound, because people expect Tesseract to sound a certain way, and a big part of that sound, or at least 1/5 of that sound, is the drums. So it's a wonderful marriage of real drummer, but the sound you'd expect, but bigger, if that makes sense. I think we did a good job. Anyway, I hope that gives you a bit of a behind-the-scenes thing. Let's see. Here we go. When playing live, do you play Tesseract songs 1-for-1 to the studio version, or do you allow some improvisation? Is there any room for improvisation in heavy prog metal songs for drummers? So I used to try and get everything just bang on the album version. That's what I used to do. I was very specific about fills. I was very specific about grooves and ghost notes. And then realized the person programming most of this was Ackle, the guitarist. And he's got an amazing mind for grooves and ideas, but he's not a drummer. And playing some of these things, it's not possible. It's very, very difficult. So I kind of started to marry my natural my abilities, the patterns and things that I knew, with his grooves to make this human version of it for live. Still keeping the vibe real and keeping it as close to the original as I could, but now I'll mix things up a little bit. I allow myself to play with a bit more freedom. I'll put different patterns in, little fills and things that aren't there on the original. And also I feel like that's important with songs that we've been playing for 10-15 years, because it keeps them fresh. It keeps them modern and new and interesting for us as musicians. If it ever got too much, I think the guys would tell me. But like, there's a fill at the end of there's a song called Juno that we've got, which is crazy. The end of that song's mental, and there's this pattern that I've been practicing that I actually didn't show you earlier, and you guys will know this, like your drummers. When I've demonstrated to some of my students, they're like, "Oh, Mike Portnoy used to do that," or whatever. So I don't know who else does this. I assume people do it though. But it's all singles between your limbs: right, left, left, right. So you're using all of your limbs, and you can do that eventually when you've practiced it. And I was rubbish at that for ages. I'm still not amazing at it. I can kind of do it just about. But for a live performance of the show that the band did in COVID, when I couldn't make it to that, the show's called Portals, and it was a Blu-ray that we put out. I couldn't make it to that performance because I was in the US. The rest of the guys were in the UK. It was when COVID was mental and we didn't know what the travel things were and we didn't know how serious it was. So I was like, well, I'm not going to risk traveling and getting stuck in the UK when the way I live and make money is in the US. This is way too much of a risk for me. So the first time in my life ever, I said no to doing a Tesseract thing, which sucked. But the guy that stepped in for me was Mike Mallion. Amazing drummer, amazing guy, friend of mine for years, plays drums in Monuments. and he had like 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks to learn a 90-minute Tesseract set, and he played this ridiculous fill right at the end of Juno. I don't know exactly what he played, but let me get the song up here and I'll show you. He played, I'll be able to get his version. So here we go, in a minute. Listen to this fill. That fill. What is he doing there? I've got no idea. But I was like, man, that is flipping sick, and that's like that's nothing like what I played at all. Like, I didn't play that on the record. I was like, shit, mate, I want to do something like that. So, like, okay, what have I got in my arsenal of things that enables me to do that live and it not sound completely shit? So I did this. So. Like that. I can't do it slow. Singles. That's the only way I could do that. I could get anywhere close to that by playing that insane right, left, right, left, right, left thing. And it works really well. And I do that live now because it's just like one moment of drum wankery in a Tesseract set. Everything else I try and keep the beat neat. And then I'm like, I'm going to play this mental thing now just to show that I can do fast things sometimes. And yeah, that's one of those moments that's just mental. I can't remember the exact question now, but oh yeah, do I play things verbatim or do I play them with a bit of improvisation? I'll play them with a bit of improvisation now. Everything's it's kept very close to the original, but I do allow myself to deviate. So thank you for that one. That was by Internex the Anoop Sastry. That's your name on Discord. Anoop, by the way, is amazing. I love that guy. Do I prefer live shows or recording sessions? How do they differ from each other? I mean, they're completely different. I mean, live shows are fun. Very, very fun, or can be very fun. Sometimes you're just tired and you want to go to bed. Recording sessions, I'd say, I mean, they're very different things. It's like saying, do you prefer breakfast or dinner? Like, you know, they're both, you have to do both, and they can both be enjoyable. I don't really know that I prefer one over the other. Do I have any fun or memorable tour stories? Oh my god. I mean, yeah. It's such a funny thing, right? Because you would think that immediately all these amazing stories would come flooding back to me, these hilarious moments on tour where, you know, such and such happened, and oh my god, that was mental, remember that? It doesn't, honestly. There's not that many things that are just like so insane that you guys would absolutely find hilarious, that would make like me the flipping person at the party that's got the flipping stories. There aren't that many. There's one that I can think of which is more stupid than anything else. Years ago, we were on tour with Animals as Leaders. It was a co-headline in Europe on the... Wow, was it? I think it was the first tour we did back with Dan. It was, because we did Scala, that DVD. So we were just at the end of Altered State, I think, going into Polaris. I think that's the timeline we're talking about now. Between album 2 and 3. We're on tour with Animals. It's 2014, end of. And we play this show. It's Garska's birthday. And someone at the show, a fan, has just got like a bottle. I think we're in Wrocław in Poland. And or I don't know if it was he or she, person bought a bottle of strong liquor to show, and we're just drinking it outside the bus, trying to be cool, man. You know, drinking this massive bottle of stupid clear liquid, and we get messed up. We get so messed up, and I remember being just absolutely battered. Me and Matt get in a taxi to go and join up with Tosin and James from our band and a couple of other people who have gone to this club. We're like, yeah, we should go to clubbing now, yeah, man. And we get to the club and we're just obnoxiously drunk. We somehow get in. We leave the club, and then me and Matt decide, oh, let's start like wrestling. Let's just fight each other. Only playing, but just like messing around. And we start play fighting in the middle of the road in Poland, which inevitably means the police come over and are like breaking us up thinking it's a real fight. And then they want to see our papers. I've got no papers. I haven't brought my passport out with me or anything. I'm drunk. I'm a drunk British idiot. I'm a clown at this point. And I just went like laughing because I'm like, well, we're fucked now, aren't we? Like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to like get out of this. I guess I'm going to be in prison tonight. Brilliant. And the promoter from the venue comes sprinting over. I didn't even know he was there. He was like, no. I kind of explained that we were on tour and we had to, like, I'll pay for them to get a taxi. They need to get back to this bus and go. Sorry, please. Sorry, please. Anyway, he called the taxi. I jumped through an open window to get into the taxi. I didn't open the door, just Superman through this window across Matt, James, Tosin, and was just giggling, and the taxi driver was pissed at me for doing this, obviously. But anyway, he drives us back to the bus. We get on the bus, and the fight continues. And I decide I'm going to end this fight. I'm going to win this one. I'm going to, in the bus, right, in the middle of a tour bus, which if you've ever been in one, they're not that high. They're like, I'm like nearly 6 foot. I'm like 5'11", and the ceiling of the bus is probably there on me. I'm like, I'm going to somersault onto Matt. I'm going to deck him with a somersault like WWE style. So I go for it. I think I land on him a little bit, but I miss mostly and fall down and slam my back. There's like these metal things that cover the edges of steps on tour buses, so that the chipboard or the MDF that's underneath them doesn't just get worn away. It's all metal edged, everything nice and conveniently. And the first thing to connect is just like my entire spine goes down this metal thing and shreds all the skin off my spine down my back. And yes, I didn't really know because I was really drunk. I just remember like going, ow, and Tosin's just going, filming it on my phone. And the next morning, God, I had a drum clinic the next morning at 2 p.m. I had a drum clinic and I got woken up to do it, and I was not in a good way. I was like, oh God, I was still messed up. And I didn't know that my back was messed up at that point until I got out of my bunk and tried to change t-shirts, and my t-shirt was stuck to my back with blood. I was like, oh God. And the rest of that tour, I had to play with a shirt off because I couldn't, like, the sweat dripping down my shirt was too much. It was too stingy. So that was probably the most dumb thing that's happened on tour to me. You learn very quickly when you do things like that you shouldn't do it again anytime soon. It was a stupid night. And I don't even know I've got that much memory from it, to be honest. I've just got like snapshots that probably have changed and morphed over time, but that was the dumb thing that happened on tour. What else has happened? I mean, that's probably the dumbest one. I can't really think of any stupid stories other than just like silly dumb things that have happened in the moment that I'd have to kind of get other people's permission to tell anyway. That one happened to me though. Let's see. What gear do I use? Let's talk about gear real quick. I haven't really done this one. So, at home, I'm in my home studio. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is my home studio. I have a Roland TD50KV. That is what this is. There's a few extra bits and bobs, a few extra toms, or one extra tom, I think, and 2 or 3 extra cymbals. That is talking to a computer over here, which has got Superior Drummer 3 that I'm running on it. So that's how I'm getting these sounds. And then I have another computer over there, so I've got like an audio computer and a streaming computer for 2 different things because it struggled to do it all in one machine. I'll just send a stereo out from this computer to another sound interface over there, and then there's no latency issues. So there's that. That's this house. I have an acoustic kit bagged up in the room next door, but I can't play acoustic drums in this house because it's too loud. So I just practice on this thing. And for the longest time, I thought, well, I am not going to be able to, like, I don't know, I'm not going to be fully prepared for tours, and I'm not going to be fully prepared for recording sessions and whatever, because I'll have only practiced on this thing. But truth be told, I practice on this more than I practice an acoustic kit ever at any point in my life. So I've been fine on all of the tours that we've done. We've done like 2-3 tours since I've been living in the US through COVID or since COVID. And I've only ever practiced on this, and then I've gone to a Tesseract rehearsal. This is dumb, right? You're going to say, oh, how the hell do you guys do this? Practice at home. We have 2 days in a room, 1 day setting up, 1 day practicing, and then we go off on a tour. We learn the stuff on a set. I've got the set on my computer here that we're going to do, play along to it, get in a room with the guys. It's the same thing. I'm just playing it on an acoustic kit. And that's it, really. That's the gear that I've got here. Then on tour, I use a DW Design Series acrylic kit, one of those clear ones. Really, really good value for money. If you want to get a DW and you don't want to pay $1 million, that's a very good way of doing it. Very, very, very good drum kits for not that much money. I have what do I have snare-wise? I got 2 or 3 snares that are DW. My favourite is the 14 by 6.5 stainless steel, basically a Black Beauty. Very, very, very good snare. I have an Evans Hazy 300 on the bottom and an Evans Powerweight on the top. That whole combination is what we used for 90% of Tesseract 5, and it's amazing. Properly amazing, that combination. Best combination I've ever found. Of all of the snares I've ever had, I've had Brady snares, I've had Black Beauty, I've made snares myself, I've got the DW brass, the bell brass snare. This is still the best one by far. The transient is lovely. It's got punch. You can tune it kind of medium to low, and it's beautiful. Anyway, Evans heads, G2 tops, G1 bottoms, kind of classic, nice and easy. Selection of minor cymbals, mostly they're all Bisons, I think. There's one pure alloy, which is part of my stack, I think. Other than that, it's all Bisons. The darks and the dries are like my jam, 100%. Someone asked me actually further down about cymbal choices. I'm going to see, where is this one? Cymbals, what did it say? I'm sure I read about cymbals. Here we go. No, it's a different one. What do we think about Meinl's new releases? I don't honestly know what they are. Will I change my setup in the near future? I don't think so. I think I've got my setup like dialed in. I'll tell you about that in a minute though. What's my favourite cymbal sound? Heavy, medium, light. So I go for lighter cymbals because they've got more flexibility. They're more musical. They don't completely overwhelm the sound. They kind of decay faster. And because of that flexibility, they don't crack as fast. You might think a thin cymbal is going to get absolutely destroyed, but as long as it's not completely cranked tight on your cymbal stand, it's got more movement. And as long as you're not just smacking it in the same flipping spot straight down and not hitting through it. Like I kind of sweep cymbals now, and I've had the minor setup that I've got now, 3 tours, 1 recording session, and I've broke 1 cymbal. Okay, so you can definitely not destroy your cymbals. Definitely. My China still looks brand new, and I use that loads. I haven't broken a splash, which is typically what goes. The main cymbal that cracked was it was the 20-inch dark that's up there, my main crash cymbal. I put a tiny little like millimeter crack in it. So yeah, very, very good cymbals. So that's what I use. And Veta drumsticks, I'm using the Power 5As because let me tell you why I'm using these. I've had Regal Tip, I've had Vic Firth, I've had ProMark, I've used like all the sticks. Drumsticks are drumsticks. You use the company that you enjoy the most, right? It's wood with a tip on it, and you hit a drum with it. People that get like, oh, these ones are better than these. It's wood. You hit a drum with it. It doesn't matter. But I do like these because I was using the Power 5Bs, and then I was using the Power 3As, and I started getting tendon issues in this hand, which kind of messed me up. Especially, I was on tour, and it really messed me up. I couldn't lift anything with this hand. I couldn't really drum with it, but I had to carry on drumming because I was on tour. So when I got back, I switched down to the Power 5As. These have been the best sticks I've ever used in my life, and I've had them for the longest period of time as well. They're the perfect weight for me to get the dynamic range out that I want and not get tired. I've got the finesse with these as well. I can kind of play French grip, do that whole bouncy thing in your fingers a lot easier than I can with slightly bigger sticks. And they just feel nice. They've got this kind of nice barrel tip on them, this kind of fat barrel, which I like. But again, it's a preference thing. It's subjective, right? These just work for me, but I really, really like those over like anything I've used before. So that's all my stuff. I've got a DW9000 pedal, which you can see down here. Chain drive pedal. I've switched out the beaters for those machine drive beaters because I like those, because you can put these little weights in them that changes how heavy or light they are. And I've also changed out the drive shaft. I've got a Trick aftermarket drive shaft for this DW thing because I thought this was just nonsense. One of my drum students actually recommended these to me. It makes it feel as though you're playing a drum there instead of it being a slave pedal. And the DW drive shaft clearly works. People play these things and have done for years, but there's like a little bit of movement in it still, even though it's DW and it's amazing. Switched over to this Trick one, and if you take your foot off both of these at the same time, they're obviously not bouncing at the exact same rate, but they decay at pretty much the exact same time. If you do that with the DW one, you basically get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the left one is dead, even at the same spring tension. So it kind of evens up the playing field with your feet if you get one of these aftermarket drive shafts, and they're like $120, something like that. Make them for most pedals. I'd now recommend to anyone that they change that out before getting a whole new pedal, because that has made a massive difference. And I fly with that thing. I make sure that I've got it when I get to the UK to play shows. Let's see some more questions now. Did drumming bring some physical or mental issues on you? If yes, how did I deal with it? I mean, the physical one I just mentioned. I had really bad pain in this right hand. I went to see a physiotherapist in Austin, Texas, when I lived there, and he gave me a stretching exercise, which kind of helped me very, very quickly get over that. I detail that in a drum lesson, actually, that's posted up on my website, so if anyone's interested in that, I'll send you a link. If you go to jpostones-drumlessons.com and click on subscriber content, there's a lesson in there which is dealing with warm-ups and injuries, and I talk about that in there. Let's see what else we got. How did you get such a lush looking beard, and how do I get that? Very, very good question. It's not related to drumming, but you just have to grow a beard. That's basically it. Just have to grow a beard, mate. Let's see what else we got. We've got loads of questions in here. I'm like halfway down. What is my favourite band? What is your favourite band? Anyone that tunes into me regularly on Twitch will know that I don't really have one. I would have said, like, in the past, Meshuggah, Dillinger Escape Plan when I was younger, Sixth, I used to flipping love that band. Incubus, I used to love that band. Now, honestly, and this is probably the worst, the only thing I listen to is what I'm learning. I don't listen to a lot of music outside of Tesseract stuff that I'm learning. I just don't. It's not what I ever choose to do in my own time. And I have to and do believe that I'm in a band that's playing the best music. I do believe that. I don't care if people think that's egotistical either. I have to believe that, because why else would I be involved in a project? Like, this has to be the best music. And because of that, because I think that and I believe that, I'm very, very, very critical about anything we put out, to the point that I'll say that is shit. Like, we can't do that. And I've said that about stuff that was making it onto Test 5. Like, no. Like, that's really bad. It's not good enough for Tesseract. And I'm often the one fighting that harder than anyone else in the band. I'm quite vocal and quite mean about it, because there's no point, like, sugarcoating stuff like that. If it's not punching me in the chest, and it's not, like, doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect my soul, then I don't let it get through the filter and it doesn't get out into the public. I'm very, very tight on that kind of stuff. Let's see. I'm going to read this. I don't know what the question is yet. How did I find my style? I find you have a very interesting and very hard style to play. And my question is, how did I get to this point, if not only been able to play these weird polyrhythms? How did I write them? I'll cover that bit first. How did I find the style? So I was very interested in bands that were writing complex music. So your Sixth, Dillinger Escape Plan, I mentioned them a minute ago. There was a handful of bands that I've stumbled upon because of my friends and the guys I was in a band with, and they just blew my mind because they were writing stuff that was so different to the stuff that was on TV that I was hearing. You know, it was around the time nu metal was like the thing, and I was discovering all these bands, some of which were older than nu metal. You know, Meshuggah had been around since like 1989 or something insane. I hadn't heard of them until the year 2002 or something. So I got into these bands, and Meshuggah especially, they were doing things that just made no sense. Like, how do they learn this? This is insane. But I listened to it more, and the patterns that were in there started to present themselves. It started to make a bit of sense. And then I realised as well, one of the things Thomas was doing pretty much all the time, he's got his pedal hat, keeping an eighth note or quarter note count. And if you listen to that and you listen to what the right arm is doing, those two things are the basis for where everything else is. They're keeping the time of everything else. This ostinato that's happening is just happening at the same tempo as these. That's where you nod your head. And like listening to Meshuggah, generally on my commute, I'd be commuting to my rubbish day job, and on the train I'd be keeping that eighth note count on my pedal on my left foot, trying to do that in time with the Meshuggah thing, and trying to know where the quarter notes were. And that really, I did that a lot. And with the Tesseract demos, that really helped me get an understanding of how to synchronize groove that with this more complex thing that everyone else is hearing, and you try and put those two things together. That's where I started to get a lot of interest, and I suppose that's where I actually learned a lot. I wasn't even at a kit; I was just listening a lot and trying to do that, which is kind of a weird thing to say. I learned it whilst not drumming, but it is the truth. And then a lot of the rest of it I picked up from Ackle's demos, because he's programming these beats that are so groovy, and I've got to try and recreate them with a human feel. I've got to try and play these things that are insanely dynamic and really sick. So listening to and trying to play Ackle's grooves kind of got me the rest of the way. And with each new album, there's a new thing to learn. There's a new pattern, a new feel that I have to learn. And once I've learned it, I can generally apply that to most things going forward. So it becomes easier. Like with this new record, I could play just off the bat probably 90%, 80 to 90% of it I could just play. Like I just knew, I've heard, yeah, okay, I'll get that. I could just play it. But then there were these other sections that were just like, that's insane. That's going to be so difficult to learn. And that's where you get the most growth. And those are the things where I have to really take it back. I have to get it up on Cubase. I put it up on Cubase in the screen in front of me. I just look at the MIDI. I'll cycle little sections until I can play that section. Right. Let's play that section into that section. Let's play that section into that section into that section. And they're just like 8 beats at a time. It's just 8 beats. You have to repeat it, and then you repeat the next 8 beats. That process is much, much, much faster than just listening and trying to pick it up that way, which used to be how I did it. With album 2, 3, and 4, I pretty much just listened to it and then played along to it and got it wrong and played along to it again. With album 5, I didn't have time to do that because we were recording it before releasing it, so I had to do the Cubase thing, which was amazing. It taught me a lot doing that. It sped the process up a hell of a lot. That's something that I'd go through in detail on my course as well, my masterclass that I've got. The whole process to do that and to make your learning process efficient. Which modern day drummers do I follow? Have I met my heroes? Do you have any heroes you are now best mates or close friends with? Ooh. Modern drummers that I follow, not many, if I'm honest. I don't follow any of them, but when I see something they've done, I'm like, ooh. I would say Thomas from Meshuggah is probably my drumming hero more than anyone else. and I have met him. I've toured with him, and he's the only person that I've toured with that I've been like, yes, sir. And I shouldn't be, because I'm nearly 40. I should be a little bit less of a fanboy, but it's very difficult around him because I've got a lot of respect. It's very difficult to not feel like, oh, anything I say is inconveniencing your day, because all I really want to do is sit next to you and have a beer. It's difficult. That's the only time with Meshuggah I'm still a little bit like starstruck. Everyone else that we've toured with, I'm just like, hey, how's it going? Who else is amazing? I've said it before, Matt from Animals as Leaders, probably one of the best drummers in the world, literally. Like, just unbelievable what he can do. He's a freak of nature. More recently, Eloy Casagrande, I've seen what he's doing. Jesus Christ, he's another freak. He can do unbelievable things, super hard hitting, but super groovy and super fast. Like, he's got... There's drummers that are either super groovy or super choppy or super fast or super hard hitting, and he's got like 3 or 4 of all of the things. Like, literally, he's built himself. I don't know if he works out, but he's built to be able to hit these things really hard. He's practiced enough to be able to do these things really fast. He's insane. Who else is amazing? Troy Wright's very good. I like watching whatever he does. He's a very, very good drummer. Bard from flipping Leprous. He's insane. Absolutely insane. Mental person. Very, very good on the drums. I got to watch them. We played a festival and we were kind of side by side. So there's 2 stages. And this was last year. One of the last shows we did, actually. And they were on just before we were on. So I'm like, oh, I get to flipping watch this guy. Get to watch him side a stage. And it was insane. Absolutely insane. He's got so much groove and fluidity to his playing. Can't think of anyone else, really. Morgan Agron, I love his drumming. I'm not really into all the music that he does, but the things that I've seen when he's just playing, especially the stuff he did with Frederick from Meshuggah, was like insane. Absolutely insane. Yeah. I mean, my peers, the people I go on tour with, generally, all of them can do something that I can't do. Yeah, Chris Turner, again, music isn't for me at all, but his abilities are... He's another freak. He's another person that can do things that... He's kind of an exception to the rule. The way he does single pedal, double kick, just... It's like, dude, and it's not triggered. Like, that's just ridiculous. People can't do that. No one can do that. He can do that. Yeah, there are some people like that are just insane. I feel like, of all of those things, I'm not a speed guy. I'm a groove guy, or I try to be a groove guy. I'm like a weird time guy. And I've got a couple of chops. But of the wheel of things that I appreciate on a drumming spectrum, there were some things that I just haven't developed at all. Speed being one of them. I'm not like super, super fast kick guy or blast beat guy. Let's see. There's more questions in here. Do I play any other instruments? No, not really. I used to play guitar a lot, but I'm rubbish at guitar now. Best food you've eaten on tour and the worst food I've eaten on tour. Best food on tour, India. Go to India. Everything you eat is amazing. They can cook in India. Doesn't matter what it is. It might just look brown and weird, but it's amazing. The flavour is insanely good. Worst food I've eaten on tour is days off when you're travelling all day in America. Or to be honest, anywhere. It doesn't have to be America. If you're travelling all day and the only food options you've got are at petrol stations, gas stations, they're just the worst. You just feel so bad. We had one day where we were travelling across Canada for an entire day, and we could only stop because you've got to travel. You just got to keep going because you can't get to the next show in time otherwise. And we had Tim Hortons for 3 meals. Like, do you know what that does to you? It makes you feel terrible for the next few days. So, yeah, that's the worst food I've had on tour. Like when me and Bailey, that's my wife, we travelled from Texas, from Austin to North Carolina. We moved house, right? We drove ourselves. It's a 24-hour drive. I had Burger King 3 times, and I could taste Burger King in my mouth for the next week every time I burped. It was terrible, and I felt terrible. I'm just like... So, yeah, that's probably it. Best food though, Indian food, 100%. Let's see what else we got. If I could create a side project in any style, what kind of music would I want to play and why? Computer game music. I would literally want to play a band that is recreating like music from Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario and Street Fighter and Streets of Rage. That's what I'd want to do. That's it. More than anything else. That's top of the list after Tesseract. I don't want to do anything else. That's it. I would enjoy that. I'd get more enjoyment out of that than any other style of music. Hands down. I love it. It's some of the best music ever. What's my approach to tuning drums for Tesseract versus tuning what I play on my own? There isn't a difference. I tune my drums for Tesseract. I kind of tune them weird. So I learned some things years ago. Kick drum, right? I play with my head, my beta sunk into the kick, right? And I know people are like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." I start from there a lot of the time because I'm using that as a leverage point for heel toe to be able to do that. And some people are like, "No, you can't do that because it dampens the sound of the drum." Well, I want a dampened drum because I'm in a metal band. I want to go poof, and it just be poof, live. And the sound engineer just wants that as well. We don't want this beach ball jazz drum. We want thud. So that doesn't really that doesn't hinder me in any way. So my tuning of it though, the bass drum, I have basically finger tight, and then every lug is like a quarter turned, if that. It's very, very loose. And the same with the resonant head, because if I start tuning it up, I'll get I just want thud. And that works really well. I'll stick like a little pillow in there, or just something to dampen the heads even a bit more, and it just sounds fat. It just sounds great. I learned that from the drummer from Sixth, actually, years and years and years ago. And it takes a little bit to get used to how loose the head is if you're used to one that gives you a bit of feedback, but that works really well. And then toms, again, the top heads, I get them all on. I finger tighten everything. I've got those Evans keys that have got like the nipple on top that you can... Oh, you're going to laugh at that now, aren't you? But it's got that bit on top that you can grip and twist. I'll get those all finger tight with a key. And then I'll go around and just like ding, 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 ding. And I kind of do opposites. I'll get them just to the point where the head isn't going bah. It's kind of bah. It's got a bit of resonance. And all of them are ringing the same note, like about an inch from each lug. I'll go around and do that. Often I dampen it just in the middle. I put my thumb in the middle and just go around and make sure they're all the same tone. And then for the resonant head, again, finger tight. I do pretty much the same thing, because the more you tune up that head, the weirder the drum sounds. Like if the closer the heads are in tuning, in my opinion, the better it all resonates and the better it sounds. Sometimes I will have to tune the bottom head up a little bit. Like I've got an 8-inch tom, and the bottom head for that is tuned up a little bit more. But pretty much it's kind of the same across the toms. And I'm at a point where I don't even really need to hit the drum. Like I can put the two heads on it. I can go around and I'm like, okay, that's going to work. And it does. Like it just sounds fine. I don't have a drum dial or anything like that. I can tune it backstage when the band's up on stage and then go out, and very rarely am I having to like, oh, I have to change that one. That one sounds shit. It just works. I've got used to how I tune. The floor tom, those three toms are about the same, 8, 10, 12. Then the floor tom, I've got an 18. Again, that one, finger tight, little, maybe a quarter turn, very similar to the kick drum. Same with the bottom, and it just sounds fat. I want that 18-inch kick drum, 18-inch floor to be an extension of the kick. I want it to be similar in tone. I don't want it to sound like, I don't like 14-inch floor toms are the worst. I want it to sound massive. And that works really well for me. Snare, I'm a bit of a freak. Again, the bottom head, I put a new head on. I don't even tune it. I just crank everything and I go around with my thumbs and check if they're all about the same pressure. And that works. I've had no complaints. That works really well. The top head, Evans Power Weight. I'll stick that on, and again, I'll go around and just kind of make sure I kind of it gets to a sweet spot with the natural resonance of the drum. There's like a note that you get from the drum, and I'll go and kind of get the head and the drum to be ringing at the same note, and then that always works really well. And with the stainless steel DW that I've got, that is just a beautiful, beautiful combination. I might be tuning like a freak, but if you come to a Tesseract show, I think you'll probably agree that the drums sound pretty nice. And listen to Tesseract 5 when the album comes out this year, and that's basically what we did for the album. I didn't go through and tune any other way that was different. We did tune the snare drum, the transient, which is the sound after you hit it, the ring that you get. We did tune that, which involved tuning the top head to a key that was complementary to the song. So we did do that for each song and then locked it in, and we did it with the toms as well. We kind of chose which notes would work, but we couldn't change them too much because when you start doing that, they start to sound weird after a point. Like the drum doesn't want to be tuned to that note. You have to kind of keep it within a certain range. If I could take lessons from any drummer ever, who would it be? A couple of drummers. Can I name a couple? Morgan Agron, I'd want to pick his brains because he can do some things that are just insane. I'd get a lot from him. Dave Ehrlich, or Ehrlich, I don't know how you say his surname. Him, because he speaks about posture and listening to your body, and that kind of thing is very important to me now. I'm not playing the same way now at 38 as I did when I was 20. I'm optimizing efficiency over how I do things. So when I'm like, when I'm playing things like that, it's French grip to get those two hits, and my hand is pivoting between those two things. I'm not bringing my whole arm back and forth. I'm optimizing things like that. Same with like if I'm doing ghost notes between cymbals, I'm not bringing my entire arm back to do it. I'm pivoting my wrist, and I've started to identify stuff like that. It just makes it easier to play, like grip things and positioning things. If you can optimize that kind of stuff, it makes your drumming life a lot easier. So Dave Ehrlich would be someone else. I'd say Thomas from Meshuggah, but I think there'd just be like a couple of fill chops that I'd really pick up from him, because I think I understand a lot of what he does otherwise, because I kind of have studied him. Maybe I think that'd be it. I don't really know anyone else that I'd want to... I mean, that's unfair. There are a lot of people, like every other drummer in the world, that I could have a conversation with, and we could sit opposite each other on kits and we could trade ideas, and each of us would probably learn something. And I could do that with anyone. But if I'm talking about specific lessons, I'd say those guys. I'd probably get a lot out of working with those guys for a few hours. Do I consider myself a gent drummer? No. No, gent to me is like... like all that stuff where it's just... production, and I don't really enjoy it, if I'm honest. I know Tesseract's traditionally got a bit of that, but so a laptop then. Yeah, basically. I don't know. Gent doesn't do anything for me, but I was speaking to someone about this the other day. I think it was the person that posed this question, actually. Gent is it's the onomatopoeic term for like the guitar sound. It's the sound of the sound, right? Gent. And because us and Periphery and Animals as leaders and a handful of other bands sounded like Meshuggah back in the day, it gave us... Gent was the word that was used to define the musical collection of these bands. It was the new pigeonhole that we could get put into. And it was helpful because it created a wave. It created this thing that every new band could jump on and ride for a while. And it gave us a bit of a head start because we were one of the first bands that was associated with that term. I think it's now massively saturated though, and so many people are using that sound and that word, and it's become a bit of a meme. It was a meme very quickly, and I wouldn't say that we are a gent band, and that as pretentious as it sounds, we just write music. Like, and I know that people need it to be put into a category to understand, oh, well, what kind of music? Is it metal? Is it reggae? It's like, well, it's not reggae, but it's not metal either. There's metal moments, there's ambient moments, there's rock moments, there's groove moments that certainly aren't from any of those things. It's just music. It's progressive, though. It is progressive. But if you couldn't really put us in the same world as older prog bands. Like, when you think prog bands, you think like Marillion and, I don't know, Pink Floyd, and there's all these bands that are prog that your dad listened to. It's like new prog with an NU at the beginning of it. We don't sound anything like those bands. There's probably influence that's drawn from some of those bands, but we sound nothing like them. Like, we just don't. It's kind of this whole new thing, but it's been lumped in with the same crowd, which isn't a bad thing, I suppose. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a gent drummer. I'd say I probably learnt something for a few months by probably being called a gent drummer. But yeah, it's not something that, if I was like meeting a new person for the first time, it's like, hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a gent drummer. What are you? Oh, I'm a doctor. Well, I know what that is. What the bloody hell's a gent drummer? There's like probably, of the 72 people watching this, there's probably like 15 people that know what a gent drummer is. Right. Let's see what else we've got. How do I apply syncopation and polyrhythms to your grooves? Any tips on how we could learn to use those techniques in our everyday playing? Hell yeah! Drumming again, guys. Less talking, more drumming. Polyrhythms. So, a polyrhythm, what the bloody hell's one of them? You've probably heard people talk about them, especially when you're talking about gent music. What's a polyrhythm? Polyrhythm is when you've got two numbers that happen at the same time. They start and finish at the same time. At the end time. Made it sound really dark, didn't I? At the end of time. That's a polyrhythm. So, the easiest one that you could literally train to a Beatle is that. Not one of the Beatles, I mean a literal bug, like a scarab. You could train it to do that. That's your 3/2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And in the same time, 1, 2, 1, 2 on the snare drum. 3/2 poly. But no one as a drummer is sitting there going that, because it would be terrible and rubbish. How do you actually use that musically? Well, let me show you. I like to use the 3/2 poly in my playing in a couple of different ways. Like, I might do, so let's say the 3 is going to be there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There. So there's my 3/2 poly. And if I pull this song up and give you an example of where it actually is in real life. Do you know this one? Luminary? 3/2 poly between there and the right hand. Here we go. There's your 3/2 poly in action. Literally using it right there. That kind of thing happens a lot in Tesseract's music. And the great thing about using that polyrhythm there is you can switch between either of those two timings. You got that. And you've also got those two things. You got You got those two things that you can lock onto, so you can change the feel when you got used to doing them at the same time. So that's one useful way that you can use polyrhythms. You can also use a polyrhythm. Let's give you another example to help you write a groove, literally. So let's take the next one. The 3/4 polyrhythm. You got that there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. A little bit more difficult than the 3/2 polyrhythm, but you could probably train that one to, like, I don't know, a lizard. Something that's got a bit more brain power than a beetle. You can probably train that one to, like, I don't know, some kind of lizard. Insert name of lizard. I don't know many lizard names. But what can you do with that? Similar thing again. What if we put that there? Similar thing. I can do that in this song. See, I have to skip forward a little bit. There. There's your 3/4 poly. In plain sight, hiding underneath all the craziness that's going on in that groove is your 3/4 poly. With the 5/4 poly, I gave you an example earlier when we were doing that. Your 5/4 poly's in there between the pedal hat and the high and the ride. There's your 5/4 poly, the dings of the bell, and that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Little bit more difficult again. And to learn any of those things, you can get yourself a metronome. You can get an app on your phone, and you can say, "Hey metronome, play these two numbers." Like you can literally get polyrhythm metronomes, and it'll play the two things, like 5 and 3. Again, kind of mental, but there's all these things. And a 3/4 poly is where a group is indecisive about a fourth partner. Yes, that's really what it is. But there's ways to use it musically. Again, that's something that I try and teach to my students, because it's one thing which is like here is a polyrhythm, play it. Okay, but how do you? Here's a paradiddle, play it. How do you use it musically? That's what you actually want to be able to do with any of these things. You don't just want to know how to stick it. You want to know how to actually use it in your playing, and that's very often the disconnect between learn these rudiments and play them. It's okay, well, I've learned the rudiments on a pad. What do I do now, please? And that's what I'm trying to do with kind of these weird timing concepts within my lessons, is teach people, here's the timing concept. This is literally it. But now let me show you ways to use that musically so that you're not just a plum that has got this thing that they've just learned with their hands but can't actually do anything good with it. You want to transcend being that lizard, and you want to... God, I've got some weird things that I say, haven't I? You've got to transcend being the lizard, and you've got to take it into like human world and start being creative with it. So there's a couple of like ideas that you can do just with polyrhythms. I hope that gave you a little bit of an insight. Let's see. So going back to symbol world for a minute. Why do I choose the symbol sound that I have? Is it a personal preference? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Symbol sounds. So I prefer thin cymbals. I mentioned that earlier because I think they flex a little bit more. They decay faster. They're more musical. They fit in the mix. The other thing that happens is with the darks and the dry cymbals that I like to use, they don't completely overwhelm the mix. Our sound engineers, since I switched from Sabian, mostly like bright cymbals, to these dark, they're the ones that look like someone's just dug them up out the ground and left all the muck on them. They're just slightly less like abrasive, if that's a good way of probably describing it. Our sound engineer was like, "Oh, what's going on here? This is nice." All of a sudden, the only thing that's really loud on stage with Tesseract is the drums. The only two things that are making acoustic noise are the drums and the vocals. And if the vocalist is in front of me, Dan, his vocal mic very quickly becomes a cymbal mic if we're not careful. And with the minors that I'm using, there were less harsh frequencies that were getting picked up in the vocal mic. So that was a success. Let me try and talk about each cymbal. So I have a main, like a 20-inch or 21-inch crash up here, generally a 20. There is, at the moment, a minor dark crash, a Bison's dark. That's wonderful. You'd think it was thick because of how it looks, but it's actually really thin. It's thinner than like the thin traditional crashes they do. It's thinner than them, which I was surprised at. And that's just wonderful and washy, and I can kind of crash ride it it's the thing that I go to the most. Then I've got 2 accent crashes over here. The middle crash, it used to be in the middle there, but for Tesseract Album 5 recording, the engineer said, move that crash from the middle there because that's sacred space for the vocals. We don't want that to be cluttering up the mix. You're going to have cymbals over there and cymbals over there, so I learned to do that. This crash, that's got to be a little bit more lively because I'll switch to that for energetic moments. It's got to be an accent crash where I'm just playing like... I want it to cut through, but it's not like... I'm very rarely over there doing that. Just a handful of moments that are bigger and faster. This guy over here is exclusively for accents. I used to use an ozone type thing over there, just really fast, just and it's gone. My stack, that's got to be cutting. It's got to be loud. And again, kind of abrasive. I want it to fit in there but be a super fast sound. And this sound on it's out of one of the Tune Track packs. I think it's out of the Progressive Foundry. It's like a 14 and 12. I use a 16 and a 12. It's a 16-inch Trash Crash and a 12-inch Mini Trash China by Meinl. And that combination is amazing. The ride that I use is a polyphonic ride, which I've been told means it's multiple sounds on one instrument. I don't really know if that is what it means, but it's got a really nice bell on it. It's crashable, and the ride ping sound is really nice, and it gets kind of washy. The closer you get to the edge, it's really nice and washy, and it all just blends. It's a really, really dynamic ride. Of all the rides that they recommended and that I've tried, for Tesseract 5, they sent me like 10 rides, and I tried all of them. That was loud. The polyphonic one was still the one that we went with of all the ones they sent me. My China up here is generally a big one. It's like 20 inches. I've got the Equilibrium China at the moment, which is thin. It's got holes in it. It sounds how a China should sound. It's kind of really, really nice. And again, somehow manages to not completely destroy a mix. It's really loud and it's really lush, but it doesn't completely ruin everything else that you're doing when you're hitting it. It's not like, oh, God. It fits really nicely. Hats, I tend to like 15s. I got 2 pairs of 15s. I got the, I don't know what they are, which is really embarrassing. I've got like they're the dark, I think they're extra dry, extra thin, Bison's somethings. I can't remember the exact names. And then I've got the Foundry Reserve as well, which is something else, something extra special. They're really nice. But I still like having the dark, dry things. They're the sweet spot for me. But to put all these things together, right, I'm going to talk a little bit about going back to like being a full-time musician. One of the things that's important is that you develop relationships with the companies that you work with, because you want to do that. You want to get opportunities. If you work with these people, there's a good chance that they might say, hey, we've got this drum show coming up in the summer. Would you like to come and be one of the performers at it? Which is like terrifying. It's not like playing a show with a band where you're like, oh, I've done this a million times. You're getting on stage in front of peers and in front of drummers and people, and you've got to then be amazing. Oh, God, I've done that a couple of times, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. But you still want those opportunities, though, because it helps you grow, and it gets your relationship grows with the company that you work with. And Meinl, right? This, going back to cymbals and trying to stitch these two brain farts together, I wasn't that familiar with Meinl's ranges. I straight up wasn't, right? I didn't really know what everything was. I'd used a couple of Meinl cymbals, but not loads. And I was with Sabian, but Sabian UK completely vanished. The support in the UK completely vanished, and with it, the support kind of vanished. There's a guy in Europe who I was talking to, but I'd sent a couple of emails and I hadn't got a response, and I don't know quite really why, but I was like, well, I don't know. I'd rather work with someone who I'm actually close with. And by chance, I met up with Joe, who's the UK Meinl rep, after a show that we did in the UK. We played in Nottingham. There was an arena show supporting Bullet for My Valentine year before, I can't remember, 2 years ago maybe. And Joe was there because Ali Richardson was there playing with Bleed From Within as well. And he said, "Do you want to go for a beer?" I'm like, "Yes, I want to go for a beer." So we sat down, didn't really talk about symbols, but like at the end of that night, because we realised, okay, we're like two humans who can like each other, I sent him a message. I'm like, I sent at the end of that night as we kind of walking away from the date, I was like, "So let's talk symbols," because like I'm not really in a romantic relationship with Sabian anymore, and I'm very interested in what Meinl are doing, and I know from all of my peers that the support is amazing. That's one of the things they say about Meinl, that their artist reps are really supportive and really great. So he said yes, hell yeah, and he said, "Send me a list of the symbols you're using at the moment," which were Sabian at the time. "I'll send you some recommendations, like based on my knowledge of those and what I think would work from our range. And then I'll send you links because they've got all what the symbols sound like on their website. They've got audio clips to listen to." And then I moved house, and like on day 2 after I'd moved house, a giant box arrives full of symbols. It's just like a library of symbols. I'm like, oh my god, I get to try all these. And they'd sent me loads, and they were just like, "Yeah, just keep them." I'm like, what? Like, keep all these symbols, all these brand new symbols? Like, what? And there was like, I don't know, 5 crashes, like 5 20-inch crashes, 5 18s, 5 16s, a couple of different hats. The ride I wanted because I kind of decided that. The stack was a guesswork, because the stack that I was using with Sabian was just something I'd thrown together. And the stack, that was my thing I was most worried about, because it's like, well, I don't know what's going to work. But again, Joe looked at what Meinl had, and none of their like stock stacks I didn't think were going to work. They're like signature stacks that, like, you know, Garska's stack, Halpen's stack, Luke Holland's stack. They've all got these things, but I'd listen to it and I'm like, it's not my vibe. That's not my stack vibe. I'm going to have to make something. So he was like, look, let's try something that's close to what you've been using size-wise. We've got this little china that can go with it, and we've got this trash mini china, and trash crash. We put those two things together, and bloody hell, if it didn't work immediately, it's not a stack that they sell, but I got it out. I've messed with the orientation of each one, hit them on a stand. I'm like, oh shit, listen to that though. When you put it a certain way around, absolutely amazing. Like, better than anything I've had before, hands down better. And replicatable. You know, I can get those two symbols again. When I did the Meinl videos last year, I did like 4 songs in Nashville with Meinl. They just got my symbol collection there. I didn't take my symbols with me. They like brought them to the studio. And I'm like, man, the stack's going to sound different, isn't it? There's going to be like a tone that's a bit different. No, it was identical. Actually identical, which is amazing. So yeah, they really helped me put it all together. And then I was like, I've got all these extra symbols. I'm not going to use these though. So I gave them back, which I don't know if people do that. I don't know if you just keep them and have them, but I'm like, well, I'm never going to use these things that I'm not using. There's no point me having them. Like, have them back, Meinl, and like, we'll deal with it. It's fine. I don't need a million different crashes. But another thing they did for album 5 was they gave me the entire stock from the UK drum show. They gave me everything that was there to have a choice for album 5. Like, Joe drove to the studio, which was like a 5-hour drive, and he delivered me boxes of cymbals that were used by the artists and used like at the show, and said, okay, use these for the session. Just give us back everything at the end. There you go. And I had them for like a month. Loads of cymbals. So it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. He rang me up the other day asking me if I wanted to go to this thing. They're just good. They're good guys. Really, really good guys. And they just happen to make amazing cymbals. But getting a relationship with the reps is very important, because it helps you further your career and get free stuff, which is very important. What else we got? I've kind of answered the questions. I've gone down all of these and answered the ones that I've got an actual answer for. So we might be approaching the end of the stream, ladies and gentlemen. Unless anyone here has got any other questions, I'd be happy to take one or two in the chat if you'd like, because I haven't really done that. I haven't really been chatting to you guys live, which, I mean, I've been chatting to you, obviously, but I haven't been responding to your questions and things. One thing I will say, because we've probably got a few drummers here, like, if you are at all interested in this, is what I do. These are my lessons. I've got a website where I've got a bunch of lessons. I've got a bunch of courses. I've got some free lessons. You can sign up for the free lessons with a free account. There's a handful of things in there. I've got a thing. This is where it's probably the most affordable thing I've got. $20 a month. You can hit that subscribe button and it unlocks all these things. Bunch of lessons, bunch of ideas. This one I uploaded the other day. It's a full transcript for Dystopia by Tesseract with the MIDI and the guitar profile. There's a lesson here on a specific fill from that song. I'll show you this real quick because this is like how my lessons work. Little video with me kind of teaching the lesson, teaching what we're going to do. The sheet music, the MIDI and the guitar pro, and then some exercises what you can do that are built into the website that are going to enable you to play the thing which is the intention of the lesson. This one is trying to get you to play this little fill. Super loud. For some reason, that's insanely loud. Let's just turn that down a little bit. And within here, you can slow these things down. So, there we go. And also you can like make it massive and do whatever you want. So, that's how my lessons work. It's very, very easy. It's a very thorough website. I've got a full course on Nocturne, which is kind of mental. That one again, there's 11 lessons in there, similar kind of structure, trying to get you to play that whole song. You've got the sheet music in there for it. And then my big thing that I try and convince people that is the way forward for them is my masterclass, which is, it says 45 lessons, it's actually 46 now, which is 5 modules, which are down the bottom here. Practicing, so setting you up with a good practice routine, which is the first thing most people struggle with. How to practice, setting up a routine, working with distractions, lifestyle stuff, and warm-ups and injuries. Very important to get through that stuff first. Rudimental stuff then, so literally covering the basics because they're super important, and if you can't use them well, then everything else gets more difficult. Then we have groove-based things. Working with ostinatos and odd timing things, that's where your polyrhythm stuff's going to be, and more difficult things as well. And then drum fills as well, so the patterns and the things that I use to kind of play most of what I do. All of that's in one place, and to join that, you can schedule a free Zoom call with me that will look like this, and we'll have a chat about your drumming and decide if this is the way forwards for you. Because what I don't want, what is completely unacceptable for me, is to have someone sign up for this and it not be the thing that transforms their drumming. So I have to make sure that what you want to learn is going to be answered in what I've got here. Otherwise, I don't accept you into it. And there are people that I've said no to. I could have taken the money and run, but no, it's more important to me that you have a good time and are therefore excited to tell other people this bloody helped me, because there's a chance that they might do it, and that helps me. So anyway, that's what I sell. If you're interested in learning from me, that is how I do it. I do have some one-on-one stuff, but that's reserved for people. I take on 5 students at a time, and I haven't got any space for that at the moment because I'm maxed out, and it is exhausting. That's why I only do 5 at a time. But yeah, have a look at that stuff, jpostones-drumlessons.com. Did you have any more questions? Let's see. Danny, what we're saying? Your video just got uploaded on Meinl's YouTube. What my video did? Was it Juno? Was it the last one, or have I just given that away? That'd be amazing if that just got pushed out. Let's have a little look. Let's see. I don't think it has. I think... Oh, maybe it has. I don't know. No, King, that one. So go and check that one out. There's one more song that's going to come out, which is Juno, which is sick. That whole session was amazing as well. Like, they sent me over to Nashville. I got to meet Chris, the US rep. We went for breakfast. We went to the studio. I tracked 4 songs. We just played them through twice. We played each song through all the way twice, and that was it. And then we just went, that one's the best. Go. And then they released it. Oh, they've put Juno up. Hell yeah. Okay, that's the last one. Yes! I've been excited about that. I didn't know when it was going to go up, so I can post that today. Brilliant. Amazing. Paradox, you just said, I'll do the Zoom call in order to enroll the masterclass to evaluate if that's really for the person. Paradox, yes. So the Zoom call, it's a bit of a lesson, but I'll get people to send me a quick example of their playing, not an edited thing, just a phone recording of them playing. Send that to me in advance. There's a questionnaire that you fill out in advance to make sure that, again, this is going to work for you. There's a couple of questions in there that if you answer no to, it just won't let you book a call because I know it's not for you. I try and get to the point where if you've booked a call, then there's a good chance it's for you. But the call's a good chance for you to ask me anything, for me to ask you the questions that I need to ask, which are going to help me understand, right, yes, this is definitely going to help you out. Because some people, they literally just need the call. They just need to be told, no, you're good. You just got to build your confidence, which the course is about a little bit. There's a little bit of confidence building in there, but it's not... You could do that just by, I don't know, streaming and talking to people. That builds your confidence. You know, I talk to people and I play, and I have to not be afraid to make mistakes in real time, deal with technical issues. That builds your confidence. You don't need to pay me to do a whole drum course to build your confidence. So, yeah, if you are interested in that, hit me up. I'd love to speak to you. I am away from the 11th of January, so I can take calls up until the 10th, which is only 4 days' time. Then I'm away until the 1st of February. So have a think. I'd love to speak to you if you are interested in it. Go and check out Juno, the video that just got uploaded on the Minel YouTube. That's the last video that I recorded with them. I play that silly fill at the end. I showed you that fill earlier. That's in there. I'm going to go and repost that in a minute because I'm excited to do that. But yeah, I think I've got through most of the questions that you guys had. Again, I'd like to thank the guys at the Drumming Discord for putting this together, for asking me to take part in an AMA. It means a lot that anyone gives a shit, which is, to listen to me talk about drums and being a drummer and being a full-time musician and Tesseract and all that kind of stuff. To get an audience for that kind of thing is amazing. And I hope that I've been able to give you guys a bit of an insight into my life, my techniques, my approaches. So yeah, thank you very, very much. The end. I'm going to put some music on and switch it over to a screen and pretend that I've got a curtain coming down now, okay? I've literally got a curtain coming down.